Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of September of 2024. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukrainian strike with Western weapons deep inside of the territory of Russian Federation. Yes, the Ukrainians began doing this. For example, today we have very powerful fire anomaly to the south of the city by the name of Tarapets. As you can see, another ammo depot of the armored force of Russian Federation was destroyed. The sources are saying that this territory, this ammo depot was destroyed as a result of the use of Western weapon. I'll remind you that just a few days ago in September, the Ukrainians attacked another warehouse that located to the east of the city of Tarapets, and this is the territory where we saw significant explosions. Probably according to some sources, there are still explosions on the territory of this warehouse. The Russians still haven't managed to fix all issues, and now the Ukrainians destroyed another warehouse to the south of the same town. And we need to understand one important thing, that today is just 21st of September. The meeting between the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, is going to take place between 25th and 26th of September, so a few days later, which confirms that during the next few days, starting of 21st of September until the 24th, I believe, of September, the Ukrainians will make additional attempts to attack the territory of Russian Federation deep inside, with the purpose to destroy as many as possible warehouses. Let's move further, because the strikes around Tarapets are not the only strikes that have been taking place since the beginning of this week. This morning we got additional updates from the southern part of Old Russia, let's call it like this. This is Krasnodar, and this is fire anomaly. According to information we have, this is the consequences of Ukrainian attack of this territory with FPV drone. Most likely the Russians have some warehouse or ammo depot on the territory of these barracks, and this territory was destroyed as a result of Ukrainian FPV drone attack. Now let's move further, a little bit further in the northern direction to the city of Tikharetsk, and during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians destroyed the third ammo depot on the territory of Russian Federation. Let's take a look at these pictures. This is the picture of entire explosion, as you can see, very powerful one. And in this video we can see a driver who is moving probably somewhere around this city, and then we can see this very heavy explosion. It looks like nuclear weapon was destroyed on the territory of the old Russia. And in this video we can see the same explosion, but from another angle. So as you can see, the Ukrainians are targeting the Russian ammo depots which are not protected at all. So we see that the Russians do have significant problems with the air defense, and the problem is that Russia is very big. And Russia have thousands of ammo depots and warehouses all over the entire territory of Russian Federation, and the Ukrainians start receiving the Western weapon with the long range, and the Ukrainians see no problem to attack and destroy the objects on the territory of Russia. So now the most important part, what do we see right now? What are these explosions meaning? First of all, we need to understand that this is something like a pilot episode, because the Ukrainians attacked the warehouse to the west of Moscow. The Ukrainians destroyed the warehouse in the southern part of Russia. It's just a pilot episode. This is something like a pilot episode that Zelensky is going to show Biden on the meeting during the 25th and 26th of September, and this is exactly a part of Ukrainian peace plan. Let's talk about this in details. During his upcoming trip to the United States at the end of September, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will seek an official invitation from American leader Joe Biden to join NATO, as well as commitments to continuously supply modern weapons to Kyiv, Bloomberg reports citing sources. This is part of Ukrainian leader's victory plan, which he's spoken about for more than once. It also provides for a clear path for Ukraine to membership in European Union Union, and other agreements in the economic and security spheres. So the Ukrainians are begun bombing the territory of Russia with the Western weapon already has begun bombing, right? And all these attacks were made not by Ukrainian drones. All these attacks were made by cruise missiles or ballistic missiles of Western production. And this pilot episode will be shown to Biden, and then they will make some probably decisions what to do next with Ukraine. Furthermore, we have additional reports that Ukrainians began spreading very important information that Kremlin is preparing strikes on critical nuclear energy facilities in Ukraine, said the head of Ukrainian Foreign Ministry Sybiga in a text transmitted from the West. According to the minister, we are talking about open distribution devices of nuclear power plants and transmission substations, which are critical for the safe operation of nuclear energy. Obviously, we should expect another provocation from Kiev. So what this post is talking about, the Ukrainians understand that the Russians can't attack nuclear power plants itself, but they can attack the facilities around power plants with the purpose to force Ukrainians to turn power plants off. And if Ukraine turns power plants off, we're gonna see completely blackout on the territory of Ukraine. And by telling all these things about attack on the nuclear facilities, the Ukrainians are probably 90% believes what they're saying, and most likely this is exactly what is going to happen, because we need to understand that Russia will not suffer all these attacks on the territory of Russian Federation with the long-range missiles. The Russians will not allow these things to happen. If Ukrainians begin using this Western weapon, then the Russians understand that they need to end this war as fast as possible. They can't, let's say, allow the Ukrainians for another year to attack deep inside the territory of Russia, because we understand that Ukrainians are not going to do this. This is going to be done by the NATO officers, the United States officers, United Kingdom officers. They will attack deep inside the territory of Russia, preparing the foothold, preparing the situation before possible World War III. Who knows? So now let's talk about the situation on the ground. We have a lot of very interesting updates, and let's continue with the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians began full-scale offensive operation. Just the previous update we were talking about this video, the Russians managed to cross the river of Kashlygach and to improve their positions from the south in the northern direction towards the villages and towns like Novoukrainka, Bogoyavlenka. We have the video of Russian tank attack. They managed to cross significant distance. They were using significant number of armored vehicles, so everything is clear. And during the day we got additional video a little bit from the southeastern direction. This is it. And then this video we can see another Russian tank attack, but this time attack was not so big, just few personal carriers. But anyway, this video also confirms that the Russians crossed the river of Kashlygach and landed on the territory that was controlled by the Ukrainians. So this tree line was captured, and these tree lines were captured as well during the previous 24 hours Russian offensive operations. So this is it. This is the first wave of attack, and this is probably the second wave of attack. So the Russians are already on the Ukrainian side of the Kashlygach River, and the Russians are going to move further, most likely towards the road between the city of Ugledar and town of Bogoyavlenka. As for Bogoyavlenka itself, as you can see, we have a lot of icons in this area. We have official reports from pro-Ukrainian sources, and the Ukrainians saying that there is a hell on the earth exactly in this point between Bogoyavlenka and Ugledar. There are so many Russians, they are attacking and attacking without counting losses in munition, vehicles, and so on. The Russians began using RBK 500. This is cluster rounds, cluster aviation bombs, which are very powerful, and the main purpose of this RBK 500 is to destroy manpower, vehicles, and the Russians were using this type of aviation bomb. The last time when they managed to success was the city of Avdiivka. During the let's say active phase of battle for that stronghold, the Russians were using significant number of these aviation bombs, and now they begin doing this the same, so which confirms that they're planning to launch full-scale offensive very, very soon, and they're planning to take under control significant number of territories. This is another video from the same direction from the coal mine South Donbass number 3. The Russians are bombing the tree lines and the fortifications around. So everything is getting clear. The Russians will begin very soon, very powerful attack, and I'm not sure whether the Ukrainians are able to hold the lines. Now let's move further. The previous video we were talking about the prison number 82, and according to different mappers, this territory was captured, but the Russians managed to enter the northern part of the prison. And during the day we got additional update from very reliable pro-Russian source that as a result of clashes the prison was captured completely and the Ukrainians were forced to fall back. So one part of Russian goal in this direction was completed. Now the Russians will focus their forces, their power, their energy to take under control Maximilianovka completely and to reach the eastern outskirts of the city of Kurakhova. Now let's go further to Ukrainsk. During the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything, just the updates we've been discussing during the previous video. The Russians entered the town of Gornyak. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the coal mine by the name of Selidovskaya, this one, and the Russians established significant control over significant territories in the southeastern part of Selidova. Northern direction, Pokrovsk area, the situation for the Ukrainians is very critical. The Ukrainians managed to improve their logistic. Basically, the Ukrainians removed their logistic from the city of Pokrovsk to the north to the village or to the town of Dobropilya. There is railways, as you can see, and this is not like it's not like regular railways that use electricity. This is very old railways that the Ukrainians are using, and they know for sure that they have no problems to bring forces here. The Russians managed to discover the situation. The Russians managed to discover the entire Ukrainian logistic network, and they began bombing and attacking this territory heavily. Just during the previous week we have lots of geolocations of significant number of explosions on the territory of the city. So now the Russians know for sure the logistic Ukrainians are using, and they will try to destroy it before further movements further in the Pokrovsk direction. As for Novogrodovka, during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians conducted several attempts to counterattack the Russian positions, but most of those attacks were repelled. Ukrainians suffered losses and without any results were forced to fall back and also were destroyed. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Toretsk agglomeration. We haven't received anything additional in comparison with the previous video, but I would like to discuss with you this part of frontline because we received very important update. The Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to establish control for more than 60 or 70% of the central Toretsk citadel. This information was confirmed by different pro-Russian mappers and some neutral resources, and this is obviously significant progress. Now the territory is split in three parts. We are talking about the northern part. This is the first part, and this part will stay as long as possible because there are connections and some logistic roads with the Konstantinovka. We have the second part in this forest, and the third part the landfill and the coal mine. So the Russians will handle with every single part separately, and the operation most likely will finish much faster than we supposed. Now let's go to the Kupiansk direction, and one of the most important updates are coming exactly from this territory. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Nevsky. We were talking a lot about this direction. Yesterday we had some geolocations since the beginning of September. We got somewhere on the 17th of September, pro-Ukrainian sources, so 4 days ago, report about significant Russian progress and that the Russians have almost reached the outskirts of this small village, Nevskaya. So on the 17th, then we got geolocation that confirm additional Russian progress, and we have colored the territory a little bit in Russian favor. And today, as you can see, we received the video with the Russian flag in the central part of the village, and this part of the village and the city and the buildings and constructions around were colored in Russian favor. Obviously significant progress. Furthermore, during the previous months, during September, we received significant number of updates from the village of Makiivka, and now we understand that the Russians launched full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to take under control two villages, Nevsky and Makiivka, and by the 21st of September, both villages were captured by the Russians. Now the next target of the armed force of Russian Federation is to maintain the line of combat contact, to maintain the corridor, to maintain the gray zone, and to take under control the fields between these two villages. It will not take a lot of time for the Russians because the Ukrainians have nothing where that they can use as a base of their defense, and most likely by the end probably of September, the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back and to cross the river of Zherebets and to enter the Ukrainian side of this river. So this is very important progress of the armed force of Russian Federation, because now they will, after the end of the battle, of this battle, they will release significant number of forces, and then the Russians will be able to start moving further in the southern direction towards the villages of Novosadovo, Terny, Yampolovka. So based on all these reports, all these updates, we can state that the third battle of Volans has started. Furthermore, as for Liman itself, we have a lot of updates of how the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory with Iskanders, with just aviation bombs. So the city is under very heavy fire, and obviously once again the third battle of Liman has begun. Now this is going to be not a very easy battle. Obviously the Ukrainians digged in deeper during the previous year, because the Russians lost control over the city in 2022, and it's like around a year and a half passed since those days, and there are lots of job to do, obviously. Furthermore, let's talk about the northern Kupiansk direction, where the Russians also continue splitting the region in two, and most likely after the fall of Kolesnikovka and Glushkovka, because these towns and these cities are the first and primary targets of the Russians during the next few days, few months, few weeks mainly, then the Russians will handle with the separate directions, with both directions separately. And as I understand, according to the geolocations, most likely the Russians are going to move in the southern direction with the purpose to attack the Ukrainian forces from behind that are located in the line between Barova and Kopanki. So as for, let's say, long-term plans, most likely the Russians are going to attack towards Barova from these two directions, because by these attacks the Russians will repeat their victory pass, their offensive pass of 2022. During that period of the special military operation, the Russians were moving exactly this way, and as soon as the Barova falls, the Russians will be able to move further in the southern direction towards Oskol, towards Izum, towards Liman, and towards the city of Slavyansk. So this is exactly the plan of the armed force of Russian Federation. Maybe the Russians will keep some activity in the Kupiansk, but as for this direction, it's better to force the Ukrainians to hold as many as possible forces that can be used somewhere else, but Ukrainians will use them here. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Volchansk. After a very long pause, so we start receiving updates. Just this morning we got report that the Russians began offensive operation towards the village of Tikha, and as I understand, the Russians managed to enter, and most likely the Russians established control over this territory. And furthermore, a few hours later, some pro-Russian sources reported exactly like this, that as a result of offensive, the Russians established complete control over Tikha, and the Ukrainians were forced to fall back. This is very important progress. Let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the Kursk direction, we have additional updates, and the most important are coming from Sverdlikova. The Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the village, but as for the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress. Now we start receiving significant number of geolocations on the line between Lyubimovka, Tolstoy Lug, Zeleny Shlях, and Novoivanovka. Significant number of armored vehicles and howitzers were destroyed by the Russians as a result of FPV drone attacks. So most likely the Ukrainians, we can't say that Ukrainians managed to stabilize the situation here. Most likely the Ukrainians brought as many as possible reserves exactly in this area with the purpose to slow down the Russians. We understand on the 25th and on the 26th of September, the Ukrainians are going to have a meeting with Joe Biden, and they need to show him a beautiful picture. They need to show him that we are able to hold the lines. The only thing you need, Western countries, to attack deep inside of territory of Russia. So our job, Ukrainians, to hold the lines, and the job of your officers and NATO, United States officers, is using long-range missiles to attack deep inside of Russia, and this is the victory plan. So now Zelensky just needs to hold the lines, and of course the Russians understand if they are able to deal significant damage to the Ukrainians and mainly to humiliate Ukrainians in the Kursk offensive by encircling, let's say, significant number of Ukrainian soldiers. This can ruin Zelensky's plan, and nobody is going to talk with him about any victory plan in the future. So significant number of vehicles were destroyed by the Russians. The Ukrainians continue sending more and more forces. Obviously, this is going to be maybe the third Robotina. But the most important updates are coming from the line between Orlovka and the village of Malaya Loknya. If you remember, a lot of mappers show this territory as a territory under complete Ukraine control. We are showing this territory as an area under the Russian control, but the Russians are encircled there. And today we got the video that confirms that there are Russian soldiers. In this video we can see FPV drone attack from the Russian side, and the Russians launched the drone from the territory of Malaya Loknya and attacked the Ukrainian vehicle in the village nearby. So let's begin this video from the beginning. Let's start the video from the beginning. I would like to point your attention to this building and to this wall. If we go back to map, we can find this building and this wall. So the Russians launched the drone exactly from this point, and the Russians attack Ukrainian vehicle in this point. This video confirms that the Russians still control the Malaya Loknya. They still control the prison, but most likely they're encircled. But very interesting updates are coming from the northern part of this direction. The Russian sources published the video of how they were attacking the Ukrainian forces. Currently, I don't know for sure what the Russians were doing. Either the Russians were conducting the unblocking operation with the purpose to release Russian forces from Malaya Loknya and to establish a safe supply and logistic road, or the Ukrainians were trying to encircle the Russians completely, and the Russians counterattacked the Ukrainians, but not allowing them to do this. So very important. Anyway, we don't know for sure what was that, but obviously the Russians were counterattacking the Ukrainians using this way of attack, and most likely the Russians either managed to stop the Ukrainians completely, and both stopped the Ukrainians completely, and to create safe supply road. And this is the beginning of disaster, because we see Russian focus in Sverdlikova, we see Russian focus that is located in this part, and if the Russians can attack from Malaya Loknya towards Leonidova, this is going to be a cauldron for the Ukrainians, and this is going to be disaster. And the most important, that the Russians still have enough of time to complete this mission before the before the meeting between Biden and Zelensky. Furthermore, we have significant number of FPV drone attacks on Pogribki. The Russians were trying to pin the Ukrainians down, while the main clashes were taking place in the vicinity of Malaya Loknya. I suppose that the cauldron to be exactly in this area, because the Ukrainians are interested in saving their positions. They will not fall back. They have this order. This is impossible for them to retreat, and this is exactly what the Russians are planning to use in their favor. As for Glushkova area, once again, nothing special. The Ukrainians haven't published anything new, just the old videos of some very small progress. The Ukrainians suffering losses, and the Ukrainians are using the Western weapon, the same story as we used to see around Robotina, and most of the Western vehicles were already destroyed or about to be destroyed. The Ukrainians were defeated completely, and they haven't managed to use the situation in their favor. Anyway, the next 3 days are going to be very interesting, so let's see what is going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.